In the small village of MOCKED, the sound of voices and laughter filled the warm morning air. Preparation for the great culinary tournament organized by King Adelino was in full swing, and the villagers were running back and forth, excited and expectant. It was a rare event, one that not only celebrated cuisine, but also attracted visitors from faraway lands. Everyone was involved, some preparing dishes, others decorating the place with palm trees and tropical flowers. All wanted to show off their best skills. But while the atmosphere of excitement took over the village, there was a young woman who, even at the center of the activities, seemed invisible to everyone. Nia, with her tall and thin figure like a fishing rod, worked diligently behind the scenes. Her hands, agile and fast, cut, seasoned, and assembled dishes with impressive precision, but the villagers' gaze was far from her, as if she were just a shadow in the crowd. She was nothing more than an object of jokes and mockery to them. When the first jokes started coming out, Nia tried to ignore them. "Look at the fishing rod. Who knows? Maybe we'll catch some tasty food," said Kofi, one of the village's young men, loud enough for his laughter to echo through the market. Others joined in, making even crueler comments, but Nia continued her task, her gaze fixed on the knives and ingredients in front of her. His face, usually calm and focused, now showed a slight tension. Kofi's words penetrated deeper each time, but she didn't want to show weakness. I continued working, breathing deeply, but the pain was there, stabbed in his chest like an invisible knife. Keisai, her twin sister, was nearby. Although she had always been his defender, today she seemed distant. When Nia looked at her, she expected to find a comforting smile, a word of support, but she found only the distracted gaze of Keisai, who, although she was physically close, didn't seem really there. Nia realized that something was changing between them, something she couldn't understand. Keisai, Fuller and Kavya, had always been the village's favorite. Her warm smile and appearance were well received by everyone, and praise for her was constant. Nia never cared much about this, as she knew her value lay in her talent. But now, in Keisai's presence, a distance seemed to have formed. Maybe it was the absence of words, or maybe it was Keisai's silence as the others jeered. Either way, Nia felt like her sister was pulling away. Nia's eyes returned to the dish she was preparing. A mix of flavors, rare ingredients, an old recipe that his mother had passed down to him. Cooking has always been her refuge, the only place where she felt genuinely accepted. When I was in the kitchen, everything made sense. The sharp blades of the knives, the aroma of fresh herbs, the sound of the pans on the fire. But there, under the eyes of others, this refuge seemed more distant than ever. The smell of smoke and the sound of mocking voices kept invading his thoughts. The event continued its course, but the pain of being invisible to everyone but Keisai was an open wound. Taking a break between tasks, Nia stepped away for a moment to get more ingredients. The market's field of vision was filled with laughter and excited screams, but she walked alone, as if the world around her was just a blur. She passed one of the village women, Zuri, who looked at her disdainfully, before turning her head and laughing softly with her friends. Nia felt pressure on her shoulders, as if she were carrying the weight of the world. Every laugh, every sneer, seemed to be another stone in his path. It wasn't just about looks. It wasn't about being thin, tall, and strange in their eyes. It was about devaluation, the disdain she constantly felt, as if her value as a person was reduced to her image. When she returned to the kitchen, Nia noticed that Keisai was talking to Kwame, her boyfriend. A shy smile appeared on Keisai's face, but Nia couldn't help but notice the way Kwame looked at her, as if she were the most important person in the world. As he approached, he heard a conversation that, although low, seemed to penetrate his soul. "I know Nia is talented," said Kwame, "but will that talent be enough? People see a woman like her and think of everything except a wife for the future. I don't know. Imagine children. How will they grow up?" Nia stopped midway, her body freezing at the words. It was the first time I had heard something so cruel from someone close to me. Keisai, silent, seemed not to react, and Nia, even though her heart was broken, was not able to confront them. She just walked away, a lump in her throat. The atmosphere at the event was more tense than ever. Everyone was preparing for the big tournament. But for Nia, the challenge seemed to be not only against the other competitors, but against everything she represented to those around her. Kwame's words echoed in her mind, and the villagers' jokes seemed to have increased, as if they were focusing on her. But even so, she knew she had a goal. The tournament could be her chance to prove that looks didn't define who she was. That skill, dedication, and heart were the true measures of worth. Tensions grew as the event approached, and Nia felt the weight of exclusion with every step. Keisai's gaze, once protective, now seemed distant. The villagers' laughter, once unimportant jokes, now sounded like cruel screams. Each insult was a sharp blade, but Nia knew that if she was going to win, she would need to endure some more. Her talent in the kitchen was her only defense, and she swore that she would not let anything or anyone take away her will to fight. The sound of the tournament's opening gongu cut through the air, and everyone gathered in the village's large square. The sisters, in silence, positioned themselves next to each other, but the distance between them was never so great. Keisai's gaze was fixed on the ground, her eyes brimming with something Nia couldn't understand. The competition was about to begin. For Nia, this would be the biggest challenge of her life, but she knew that the real battle, the one that really mattered, was just beginning. Nia was alone in the small kitchen of her home, surrounded by the rich, earthy aromas of the spices she used to season her dishes. The sound of the pestle crushing the herbs and the constant rhythm of the knives cutting fruits and vegetables were the melody that made her feel at peace. In the kitchen, she felt safe, away from the judgmental looks that accompanied her whenever she stepped outside the house. The kitchen was her comfort zone, her secret refuge where no one looked at her with judgment, where she could just be Nia. Her hands moved deftly, in a perfect flow between tradition and innovation. Each dish she created was a work of art, an extension of his own heart. But despite being recognized for her unique talent, the village seemed unable to see beyond her appearance. For them, what Nia did wasn't enough. She was still seen as a shadow, a displaced figure. In the last days before the big culinary tournament, Nia isolated herself even more, immersed in her work. The recipe she prepared was a legacy from their mother, a combination of secret flavors that reminded her of the times when the two sisters shared laughter and dreams. The recipe was simple but full of soul, a mix of roots and fruits that, when done right, could make anyone forget the pain for a moment. She dedicated herself body and soul, not only because she knew her dish could impress, but because that was the only way to assert herself in the face of the contempt she felt every day. The smell of spices wafted through the kitchen air as Nia lost herself in thought. She knew that the tournament would be her moment, her chance to show that, despite everything, her talent could overcome the limitations that the world seemed to impose on her. Keisai, on the other hand, wasn't so sure where she was emotionally. Her relationship with Kwame had come to an end, and she couldn't understand the reason behind it. Kwame had said that Nia's appearance, her thinness, her lack of curves, made her unsuitable for a prosperous future, as if there were something that could be measured. He stated that in a village like theirs, image was as important as any skill, perhaps more. A wife who was admired is what any man needs, he had said, with a coldness that broke Keisai's heart. She wanted to rebel, to defend her sister, but something inside her stopped her. Keisai began to wonder if perhaps it was true. Was Nia really so different from the others? Could it be that, if he didn't have the physique that everyone expected, his future would be irreparably compromised? With these doubts hanging over her, Keisai began to pull away from her sister. She, who had always defended her tooth and nail before, began to look at Nia with a look full of uncertainty. What once seemed to be just a matter of appearance was now touching something deeper within her, something she didn't know how to deal with. One afternoon, while Nia was focused on preparing the dish, Keisai appeared at the kitchen door. The silence between them was heavy. Keisai looked at her sister and, in a sigh, tried to break the silence with soft words. "You shouldn't care what they say, Nia," Keisai said, trying to sound reassuring. But there was something in his tone that didn't go unnoticed. Nia looked up, her dark eyes reflecting the pain she was already trying to hide. "How can I not care, Kasai? You don't understand. They call me a monster, and I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything is okay anymore," Nia replied, her voice filled with a deep sadness. The silence between the sisters lasted for a few moments, but Kasai didn't respond immediately. She simply looked down, feeling a mixture of guilt and confusion. I'm sorry for you, but maybe it's time we face what people really think," Kasai murmured, her words as empty as the space between them at that moment. These words fell like stones into Nia's heart. It was the first time that Kasai seemed not to be by her side, the first time that she felt that her sister was abandoning her. The pain of being rejected wasn't just coming from the villagers now. It also came from the person she loved most, her twin sister, the only person who could have been her refuge. The trust she had always had in Kasai was crumbling, and she was forced to face the fact that perhaps the only thing left for her was to face the tournament alone. The event was approaching, and Nia knew that if she was going to do something, she would have to do her best, not just to show others, but to prove to herself that she was more than the image others had of her. Tension in the village increased as the big tournament approached. The villagers were all gathered around the tables, eager to see who would be the winner. Kasai, although she still seemed distant, was there too, but her eyes were fixed elsewhere, on Kwame, who had been indifferent to her since the breakup. What Kasai didn't know was that Nia's true battle wasn't just in her cooking skill, but in the constant fight against the contempt she felt from others. Nia felt like a weight on her shoulders, as if she was going to carry the burden of all the expectations, not only from her village, but also from her own sister. She took a deep breath and, with shaking hands, finished preparing the dish, the last touch. The smell of the dish exuded a mixture of hope and pain, but Nia was undeterred. When she entered the tournament battlefield, the confidence was silent, but her heart was still heavy, her eyes shifting away from Kasai, who was watching her from a distance. The atmosphere was charged with tension, and Nia knew that, despite everything, this would be her moment. She needed, at least once, to feel like the world saw her for who she really was. The culinary tournament was in full swing, and Nia, with her undisputed talent, advanced through the competitions one by one, surprising the judges and leaving the villagers silent. With each dish she presented, she demonstrated her unparalleled dexterity, mixing flavors and aromas with the precision of a master. The smell of spices spread through the air, winning even the most skeptical hearts. However, as Nia gained ground, the village's contempt only increased. The whispers became more audible, the laughter more visible, as if each victory was a silent threat to what others considered to be right. "Look, the fishing rod is going to catch us another boring meal," mocked a woman from the village with a cynical smile, and soon the others followed with muffled laughter, which seemed to echo in every corner of the field. The words sharpened like knives, trying to cut at Nia's confidence, but she remained unfazed, as if the words couldn't touch her. The atmosphere around her was dense, filled with surreptitious glances and disdain, disguised by a facade of politeness. Even in her calm posture, Nia felt each comment pierce her like a spear, each laugh a small wound in her soul. With each challenge overcome, she felt more and more pressure on her shoulders, the weight of collective judgment, and above all, the coldness of Kasai, who watched from afar, without a word of encouragement, without a smile. Kasai was there, but she seemed to be in another place, far away, as if her sister were already a stranger to her. In moments like these, Nia wanted to step away, leave the tournament, escape to the safety of her kitchen where the world seemed a little less cruel. But he couldn't. Something inside her pushed her to move forward, something stronger than the harsh words and the cold looks. The desire to prove that she was not what others saw, to show that, despite the invisible scars, she was capable of more. When it came to the last challenge, Nia felt like the weight of the world was about to collapse on her. The dish she prepared needed to be perfect, but her mind was heavy with all the shadows that haunted her. She cut the ingredients with almost surgical precision, but her hands shook, not because of a lack of skill, but because of the doubt that was beginning to take root within her. Kei-sai's gaze was fixed on her, but there was no support, no pride in her sister's eyes, just the indifference that Nia could no longer ignore. She felt like she was doing everything alone, like she was finally being rejected by everyone. The village's words echoed in her mind, and humiliation seemed to threaten to swallow all her courage. With each cut, she heard the laughter, the jokes about her appearance, about her way of being, and that made her question, am I really that ridiculous? Is all this effort worthless? But then, as his knife slid across the leaves of fresh herbs, an unexpected light flashed through his mind. Nia paused for a moment, her fingers still gripping the utensil, as a sense of clarity washed over her. She looked at the ingredients before her, smelled the mixture in the air, and finally heard her own inner voice, like a soft, powerful whisper. They can call me whatever they want, Nia thought. Her eyes closed for a second as the revelation settled inside her mind. But today, I'm going to prove that I'm more than that. I'm unique. The weight that had once crushed her began to lift, and the feeling of shame gave way to renewed strength. She was not what they saw in her. She was more than the suspicious looks, more than the cruelly spoken words. She was her own strength, her own truth. And what she did came from the heart, not from appearance or other people's acceptance. With her mind renewed and her spirit strengthened, Nia dove back into her dish, now with even more intense precision and dedication. Her hands, which had previously been shaking, now moved with confidence, as if everything she needed was inside her the whole time. The sauce he prepared was the last piece of the puzzle, the final touch that would transform his dish into something memorable. She smiled, a small expression but full of meaning. Something had changed inside her, and now she was ready to face whatever came her way. The humiliation no longer touched her in the same way, not with the same force as before. Instead, she felt a flame burning in her chest, a determination that no cold stare or mockery could extinguish. The last test was about to be finished, and Nia knew that the battle was not over yet. She looked at the finish line in front of her, where King Adelino was watching intently. His gaze was steady, but there was something about it that made her feel like maybe, just maybe, he was capable of seeing beyond appearances. Nia was no longer worried about what others thought. She was only concerned with what she knew she could achieve. She could lose, yes, but at that moment, she felt that she had already won, because her victory lay in not giving in to the shadows that wanted to make her smaller. She stood up, her posture now upright, her eyes focused on the finished dish. When he handed it over to the judges, he no longer waited for external approval. She knew, deep in her heart, that her greatest prize had already been won. She knew herself now, and that was enough. Kei-sai, who had watched silently, now looked at her in a different way. The pride that had previously been absent from his gaze was mixed with something darker, something that looked like regret. Kei-sai's gaze was no longer judgmental. It was shameful. She realized, in that moment, how much she had failed her sister, how much she had left her behind. Nia, with her spirit renewed, felt her sister's presence, and, for a brief moment, their eyes met. Kei-sai tried to smile, but the smile was weak, empty, as if she was trying to correct something she knew could no longer be changed. But Nia, with her head held high and her heart firm, was unaffected. She already knew that, in this game, she had won. The rest was now just a formality. The big moment of the competition had finally arrived. The field was silent. The tension in the air was palpable. People waited apprehensively for Nia's final dish. The young cook, who had faced so much scorn and ridicule, now stood before an audience of ruthless judges, including King Adelino himself. She had nothing to lose, but more importantly, she had found something inside herself that no one else could touch: her confidence. When Nia placed her dish on the table, a complex, carefully crafted delicacy layered with flavors as rich as its journey, the murmur that followed was one of surprise and curiosity. The dish was not just a mixture of ingredients, but a work of art, a representation of Nia's soul, her struggle and her resistance. The aroma spread, a vibrant, comforting scent that filled the air and made even the most experienced judges stop to breathe, as if something magical was being revealed. As King Adelino leaned in to enjoy the dish, the village was left in suspense. They expected Nia to fail, that her cooking wasn't enough, that her appearance and origins could determine her fate. But none of that happened. The king, with a surprised smile, tasted the food, and for a moment his serious face gave way to the expression of someone who had just been conquered by something truly exceptional. He didn't need more than a single look to understand that this was not just a delicious dish, but a symbol of overcoming, of courage, of authenticity. He smiled, and that smile was enough to trigger a wave of applause that reverberated throughout the field. The villagers, who had previously mocked Nia, now found themselves forced to recognize her talent. They were being led to a disconcerting revelation. This scorned young woman was, in fact, an unbeatable force. Nia, with the simplicity that characterized her, did not show euphoria, but a humble smile. She didn't need the applause, she didn't need the words. Victory was already written in his heart. But what happened next took her by surprise. King Adelino stood up, with a sparkle in his eyes that no one could ignore. He looked at Nia, and all eyes turned to her, anxious, expectant. And then, in a firm, commanding voice, he declared her the winner. "You are not just a great cook, young Nia. You are an example to all of us. What you demonstrated here today goes beyond culinary skills. You showed us that true power lies in being who we are, without being afraid to show ourselves to the world," said the king, with an expression of pride on his face. Then he crowned her with gold, and the riches he offered Nia were accompanied by luxurious clothes and, most importantly, the respect of everyone present. But what really touched Nia was not the riches or the clothes, but rather the reverence she had finally earned. The heat of the moment seemed to envelop Nia, but a part of her still felt a sense of unease. She knew she was not alone in this achievement. There, in the background, was his sister, Kasai, watching everything with teary eyes. The sister's reaction was immediate. Kasai, deeply sorry for everything she had done, could no longer hide the weight of guilt she carried. She approached Nia, and her slow, hesitant steps revealed how small she felt in front of her sister. Nia felt Kasai's eyes on her before she even heard her voice, and it was with a serious but welcoming expression that Kasai finally spoke. I'm Soda? No, I shouldn't have let you go through this alone. You're stronger than I thought. I'm ashamed of how I treated you," Kasai said, her voice trembling, full of regret. The words came with the weight of all the days of silence and contempt, and Nia knew how much those words were filled with pain. Those words hit Nia in an unexpected way. She felt neither anger nor frustration. Instead, there was a gentle relief, as if something was finally being repaired. Nia looked at her sister and, with a genuine smile, replied, "I know you love me, Kasai, but the fight was mine, and today, this victory is all mine." Nia's response was neither bitter nor vindictive. It was an affirmation of who she had become. She had found her own strength, her own identity, and that victory was not about what others thought of her, but about what she knew she could achieve on her own. It was no longer about the humiliation or contempt from before, but about her ability to stand up and fight for herself. Kasai, her eyes full of tears, could say no more. She just approached and hugged her, in a gesture that sealed a new understanding between the two. The look of the village, which before was full of scorn and mockery, was now one of respect and admiration. Those who had doubted Nia now saw her as a leader, someone who had turned their pain into strength, their struggle into triumph. The wind that was blowing at that moment seemed softer, as if even nature was celebrating Nia's transformation and the rebirth of the respect she so deserved. Nia, with her head held high, felt a feeling of lightness that she had never imagined feeling before. She didn't need anything more than that moment, the certainty that her journey had changed her forever. When she walked away from Kasai, their smile met again, but now it was no longer a smile of distance or silence, but a smile of understanding and reconciliation. The sisters were united, and the village finally recognized the value of those who were previously invisible. Nia's coronation ceremony was a spectacle like no other. King Adelino, with his majestic gestures, placed the golden crown on Nia's head, symbolizing her rise not only as the winner of the tournament, but as an icon of perseverance and courage. The people who once looked down on her now bowed before her in an act of profound recognition. The villagers who had laughed at her simplicity, who had mocked her appearance, were now silent, absorbing the greatness of the one who had, with her own hands, changed the course of her life. The soft music of flutes echoed in the air, accompanied by the murmur of the winds, as if even nature was celebrating that moment of transformation. Nia, with humility, accepted her awards, not with the arrogance of victory, but with the calm of someone who knew that the true achievement lay in something much deeper. She didn't need the luxurious clothes, the golden adornments, but the world gave her everything in recognition of what she represented. Kasai, watching her sister there, couldn't help but feel a wave of emotion course through her body. She had always known that Nia was special, but in that instant, Kasai understood clearly what she had never seen before. Nia's true strength was not in her looks or her cooking skills, but in her authenticity. She had known how to be true to herself, even when the whole world told her otherwise. Kasai's heart was light, but at the same time tight, as if she had finally understood the value of unconditional love and mutual support. She knew that Nia's journey had not been easy, that her sister had often been the target of criticism and rejection. But now, she saw clearly what Nia had earned: respect not only from the village, but more importantly, from herself. There was no more room for doubts or regrets. Kasai walked towards Nia, and as she approached, she smiled, a simple expression but full of gratitude and recognition. The two sisters looked at each other, their eyes sharing a deep silence, as if they were speaking a secret language. Nothing else was needed. The truth was there, in that look, in those minutes when the world seemed to have stopped around them. They had faced pain and separation together, and now, the bond between them was stronger than ever. The love, the support, the understanding, everything they needed was already in their souls, intertwined with the invisible threads of sisterhood. Kasai's hands touched Nia's shoulders gently, and they both felt a weight that had been lifted, a burden that was dissipating. Nia, with her eyes fixed on the village before her, said in a low but powerful voice, almost like an affirmation to herself, "I was called a fishing rod, but now I am a symbol of resistance. True beauty is in being who we are, without fear of the judgment of others." These words, spoken with such sincerity, resounded like an echo in the air, reverberating throughout the entire field. It was no longer about appearance, nor about other people's expectations. It was about being true to your own essence, about facing challenges and continuing, about not allowing anyone to dictate your value. As Nia and Kasai walked back home, the path felt lighter, as if the earth beneath their feet recognized the change. The trees along the road swayed gently, as if whispering blessings to the two sisters, and the sky, at dusk, was tinged with golden and orange tones, like a warm embrace from nature. The wind caressed their faces with a softness that made the moment seem eternal. There was a serenity in the air, a sense of completeness that surrounded them. The village was behind, but Nia and Kasai's transformation was visible not only in their attitude, but also in the way the world saw them now. Time had passed, but nothing would be the same again. Women who had once been invisible, who had once been judged, were now back where they belonged, with more strength and more clarity about who they really were. Kasai, with her heart finally at peace, looked at Nia with a shy but proud smile. "I never doubted you, Nia. I just didn't know how to see it before," Kasai said in a soft voice, as if she was still allowing herself to feel the impact of it all. Nia looked at her and, with the same tenderness she always had, replied, "I knew you would be by my side, Kasai, and even when no one else believed in me, I knew you loved me." It was the simplicity of those words that touched Kasai the most, as if they were a reminder that, in the end, what really matters are genuine connections, Love that doesn't need proof or complicated words. Just be together in moments of difficulty and in moments of glory. The way home now was not just physical, but symbolic. The two sisters were reconstructing a history that would never be erased. They had earned respect, but more importantly, they had earned themselves. The future was no longer an uncertainty, but an opportunity to grow, to explore, to learn. And the greatest reward Nia had received was not in the crown or the gifts, but in the peace that now lived in her heart. She knew that, regardless of everything that happened from then on, she had already achieved the most important thing, her true identity. The end of the journey was not the end of the story. In fact, it was just the beginning of something much bigger. If you enjoyed this video, please help us grow by subscribing to this humble channel. And if you'd like to watch more videos like this, we prepared the next video especially for you. Click here to watch.